Hello! Welcome to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about films off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. My name is Clay, and with me, as always, is Amanda. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm great. I have a box full of knives and some creaky black leather gloves, and I'm ready to have some fun, Clay.
I have my verbal tick ready so long, and I will employ it when I need to so long.
Yes.
Listening to that guy talk, all I could think of was Pepe the Prawn.
Yeah.
You know, because he's
Yes.
always, well, it's okay. He ends
yeah.
everything with, it's okay.
It's all right.
It's all right, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are talking today about The Bird with the Crystal Plumage from 1970, which is Dario Argento's directorial debut. It is number 88 on our list and has an 85% Rotten Tomatoes score. Had you seen this before?
No, I came in totally clean slate on this one, and I did not realize it was his debut.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
He had been around for a while, writing some stuff. At least it's his first solo credited director. I think he might have worked on some other stuff.
I think that counts.
Yeah. But he wrote. I can't remember if I mentioned this during Deep Red, but he co-wrote Once Upon a Time in the West. So he had been. I guess he had been known as more of a Western and sort of like action writer.
That's so interesting.
And so it was a bit of a surprise for him to come out with this taut Hitchcockian thriller, or may I say a Michael Powellian thriller, based on what we had discussed last time with Peeping Tom.
Yes.
Because I stand by what I said. I think that there is a lot of Peeping Tom in the Giallo films, and this is sort of the Giallo movement had sort of started with Mario Bava in 1963, I think, with a movie called The Girl Who Knew Too Much. But this movie is the one that's sort of credited with really blowing it up as a genre.
Yeah, and I didn't know it was this film, but I know Argento's kind of known as like refining the elements of it.
Oh, totally.
Like
Yeah.
really distilling it down to like, this is what makes a Giallo film tick.
Yes, and we will talk about that because if it is possible to make a movie entirely out of tropes, I think this is it.
This is essentially Dario Argento Mad Libs.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. For better or worse, depending on how you feel about it. But I had not seen this either. I had actually been wanting to watch this for a long time. And I specifically kind of avoided it once we started doing this because I knew we were going to watch it eventually.
Yep.
And I'm a fan of Argento's. I like Argento stuff when it skews more weird. So I'm more a Suspiria and Inferno kind of fan.
Same.
But I have to say, I've been kind of coming back around as I've watched more of the straight Giallo stuff. Like, I really like Deep Red.
Yeah.
And a couple of the ones we're going to do, depending on what we end up doing next year for Patreon, we might hit another couple of Giallos of his, like Tenebrae, and something like Opera, which are a lot more. It's tough because... Well, we'll get into it when we talk about... I'm jumping the gun here. We're jumping the straight razor. We're going to play the trailer for you, take a quick break, and we'll be back.
I can't get in! How do I open the door?
I'm Inspector Morosini. I want to know everything you saw and heard.
I can't pin it down. There was something wrong with it, something odd.
There is a dangerous maniac at large in this city.
Do you really love me?
Sure.
Just before we closed, we sold that painting that was in the window.
Did you make the sale?
No, the poor girl did.
Last night, a blonde, 28, lived alone. The press are beginning to put two and two together. They think they see a link between the four murders.
feel that I'm getting closer to the truth every minute. That's why he's trying to kill me. This damn thing is turning into an obsession.
Okay. The Bird with the Crystal Plumage from 1970, written and directed by Dario Argento, based on the novel The Screaming Mimi by
Great
Fredric
title.
Brown.
I still want to know, did the phrase come first or did the novel, or is it a novel or a novella?
According to IMDb, it is a novel.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering because I've heard the phrase "the screaming mimes," but I did not realize it was also a book.
Yes. The origin of the Screaming Mimi's first recorded in 1925. No, maybe I don't know. I have no idea. But yeah, it is a question whether or not that the title predates the phrase or vice
Chicken and
versa.
the egg scenario.
Yeah. Either way, I think Bird with the Crystal Plumage is a better title. I think personally, because Screaming Mimes sounds like some sort of space monster movie.
But that just might be to our modern sensibilities.
That's
Clay.
true. It actually was. The book was adapted as The Screaming Mimes in 1958, I think. And apparently, I was reading that there is some connection between that and Psycho, where Psycho actually kind of riffs on something that's in that movie.
Oh,
So
interesting.
all of this stuff is one big,
Yeah, melting pot.
circle jerk or melting pot.
Circle jerk.
But this movie, Bird with the Crystal Plumage, stars Tony Musante, Susie Kendall, Enrico Maria Salerno, Eva Renzi, Pino Patti, and Kurt Barlow. Jesus Christ. I've been talking all weekend.
The vampire.
I was at the Vampire. I was at New York Comic Con this past weekend doing nothing but talking. So I'm
going to make Clay carry this episode, you guys.
Yes. That was to ruin my joke, which is not a joke. That it also has Kurt Barlow, the vampire from Salem's Lot, in it. The
Excellent
assassin,
casting.
The assassin in the yellow jacket.
Yes.
Is
from the Boxers Club.
From the Boxers Club is Kurt Barlow, the vampire. Amanda.
Yes, Clay.
Take this away from me. What happens in this movie?
An American writer, Sam Dalmas, is living in Rome with his girlfriend Julia. While visiting an art gallery, Sam witnesses an unsuccessful murder attempt by a mysterious figure. As the assailant is believed to be an infamous serial killer, Sam quickly becomes a key witness in the ongoing police investigation. After he begins searching for clues that may help him identify the killer, Sam discovers that he may be the next intended victim.
It's the plot of every Dario Argento movie.
Yes. Or also known as man watches helplessly while woman is stabbed.
Yes, every Dario Argento movie where the protagonist is a male, this is the story.
Yes. Well, Clay, some things you'll find in The Bird with the Crystal Plumage include...
Yes.
Sex metronome.
I have lots of questions about the sex metronome because
I wanted to make this a segment of the episode.
So when do they start it? Because when they start making out,
yeah.
metronome is nowhere to be seen, but when they're done, it's going.
Maybe
so
it's to help him keep time.
I guess.
Let me just say it that way.
Yeah, I suppose. I guess you got to focus on something so you don't get, too ahead of yourself there. But maybe it's like he's training or something.
I have no idea. Maybe it's the only way he can find completion is to the tones of the metronome.
Maybe he has a problem with premature ejaculation. And so this thing, and I think this fits into the weird psychosexual undertones of the film. So I think we might have cracked it.
Yep. I also just want to say I love that we both immediately blamed him for the sex metronome.
Oh,
It
yes.
never occurred to either one of us that Julia had anything really to do with it.
No.
She seemed too normal. A dinner of raw radishes and cat meat.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts about that whole sequence. But,
all part of a balanced diet, Clay.
Yeah, I guess...
The food pyramid, the base of the pyramid's raw radishes. The top is cat meat, and that's it.
Yeah, and the rest is some sort of gravy, I guess.
Yeah, and wine.
And wine. Yeah, yep. All of these Argento movies need to have one weirdo in them.
Just
at
one?
At least one weirdo.
There's several weirdos in this movie.
There are.
Which I'm all for. I love the weirdos.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. Cosmic art.
Yeah, is that a real thing?
And near death by.
Yeah, is that a real genre of art, or does that...
I mean, my knee-jerk reaction is no, but
Yeah.
I'm 100% sure that someone in real life was like, no, man, this is a subgenre. It's called cosmic art.
It does feel like something that existed between 1968 and 1972.
Yes, with a lot of LSD.
Yeah, and like was really popular on like one block in Italy.
Yeah. Yes, and Dario Argento was like, aha, the future.
Yes, and then it was all completely gone.
You'll also find in this movie perverts.
Bring in the perverts. Best part of the movie.
Send in the clowns. Bring in the perverts.
Bring in the perverts, but
bring them in.
Not the transvestites, because transvestites are not perverts.
Ursula was lovely, and I'm sure she's not a pervert at all.
No,
let her go
absolutely
home.
not.
Those
No.
heels look like they hurt. You'll also find bedtime cigarettes.
Bedtime. That was another man. If you ever needed something,
the 60s were just a different time.
If you ever needed something to just like firmly root this in 1969, 1970 Italy, it's a big-breasted woman in a nightie lighting up a cigarette,
a sheer nightie,
right as she goes to sleep.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. This is, as I said, sort of the Giallo that sort of like kicks off the era in the 70s. It's the one that made Dario Argento kind of a household name. Giallo, of course, being the Italian thriller and mystery genre, taken from the mystery books with yellow covers. Giallo means yellow. We covered all this on Deep Red. Do your homework.
Pause this episode.
Yes.
Go back. Listen to the Deep Red episode and then come back and finish this one.
So the thing that's so fascinating about this is this has so many identifiable Argento things, like right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Like the first thing you're seeing is black leather gloves and a bunch of knives.
Yes.
And like the black leather gloves.
AKA the first things you see when you walk into my house.
Yeah. And the black leather gloves stroking the knives in a very kind of sexual way.
Sitting at a typewriter in a full trench coat and hat, poking away with my black leather gloves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me how much this is like I mean, I guess you could say for better or worse, but it is Argento's thing kind of fully formed right away.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I would say fully formed, but I know what you mean. Like all of the elements are there, and it's sort of like he focuses on various ones in different movies, and maybe drops a couple over here, and then adds them back in the next one, but drops this other thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like this set of pieces that he keeps building different structures with, and it's really interesting because he clearly is chewing on the same ideas and trying to kind of like, I don't know if he's trying to like find some perfect expression of them or is just finds them to be such rich texts in and of themselves that he can just keep reusing them. Yeah, and it is fascinating to me that this setup, which is it's just kind of this, he goes back to this a lot, which is male protagonist, usually American or at least not Italian. Yep. In Deep Red, I think he's English. Yep. Who lives in Italy, who gets wrapped up in a murder thing. Yes. Who then starts doing more detective work than the police. But he specifically with and they're always artists. Yeah. Like there's this guy, and this one is a writer in Deep Red. I think he was a pianist. Yeah, he's a musician of some composer. Kind. Yeah. Tenebrae, which we'll get to eventually, I believe, is a writer again. So there's this there's this element of an artist living abroad who gets caught up in a murder thing after basically seeing the murder happen. Yeah, sort of just accidentally stumbling into it. Yeah. Like none of the I shouldn't say none, but most of his protagonists don't seem to do anything to cause any of this or put themselves in any particular situation. It just sort of happens to them, whether or not they sort of are initially interested.
Yeah, and this one is really interesting too, because as I was joking about it at the top, this kind of feels like a movie that's built entirely on tropes more than it is story. And I mean, it's really tough to criticize in that way because Argento's movies and like Italian horror movies from this era, full stop, are basically like, if you're coming for the plot, then you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
Like,
if you're looking for something that's very like logic driven and narratively coherent, like,
which is ironic because what he's drawing from for these movies are mystery stories, which are traditionally very tightly plotted.
Yeah.
And the best ones, as they tend to, the cliche goes, should give you all the pieces to solve.
Right.
And this one, I don't think you could solve this if you were given I think you could probably guess the killer, but you definitely could not guess why.
Yeah. No, I am proud of myself because at some point while watching this, I said to you, I wonder if the killer is a woman.
Yeah.
And that was purely just, I think there was like one scene where I think that showed the killer, and just proportionately it looked like the person had very small hands.
There was also...
And I was just like, I feel like that's a lady. And then the two recordings with the different voices, I was like, I feel like there's maybe two killers and one of them's a woman.
After you said that, I noticed the scene where the killer is digging through the door with the knife while Julia just like writhes and screams on the floor of a very large apartment.
Has a full breakdown directly in front of the door when she could run like many feet in a different direction.
I noticed when you see the eye in the door, it's pretty clearly a woman's eye. Ah,
interesting. I missed that.
But yeah, it's interesting that he takes this genre, this mystery genre, and really kind of runs it through like a surrealist filter that kind of requires you to let go of the logic of a traditional mystery thriller.
Yeah.
Because I don't think he's interested in that.
Yeah,
I think he's
so
because what he's interested in this one and in Tenebrae and a lot of these other ones is very much the act of like voyeurism.
Yeah.
And watching and seeing, because this and Deep Red have another similarity where they are both about, or they both come down to the protagonist questioning what he saw.
Yes.
That ultimately helps him, quote unquote, solve the mystery.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's being watched the whole time.
Right. And the
stalked
way
by the murderer.
The way everything is kind of like framed is very much like watching like the attack that he witnesses is almost like he's watching it on a screen, a movie screen.
Yeah, and he himself is like trapped in a display case.
Right.
He's in a glass box. It's sort of like he becomes part of the gallery.
Yeah.
He's like an object on display at the same time as she is being stabbed and viewed.
Yeah. And, the way that I almost kind of wish, and I mean, I guess he does this as he does his later movies, but I almost kind of wish he had stripped away more of the traditional mystery stuff.
I was going to say that I kind of wish, like, I think I've been thinking about it a lot since we watched this. I think I like Deep Red more because it's weirder.
Yeah, me too.
And I think this one suffers from trying too hard to make things make sense a little bit, at least. Like, I feel almost like there was a little bit of maybe hedging of bets, where it was like, we don't want to totally lose the audience, so we're gonna give like some clues. We're gonna kind of parcel some stuff out to make it seem like this makes some sort of sense, and it's like it kind of doesn't need to. Like, yeah,
it really doesn't. And one of the things about this movie, and unfortunately about this genre generally, is that this movie has the fastest cop plot we've come up to.
Yes.
But but the thing about this setup is, and I really I'm really going to want to come back and talk about this after we do Suspiria, which we will be doing next month because Amanda and I are going to see Suspiria with a live performance by Goblin.
Oh, it's going to be so good.
Which I'm very excited about. But I'm really interested to talk about this in reference to Suspiria because not that Suspiria is explicitly a Giallo movie, but the main difference is that one of them has a male protagonist, one of them has a female protagonist. In the female protagonist movie, everybody that she tries to get to help her just writes her off as being hysterical.
Yes.
In the male protagonist movie, the cops literally say, could you maybe look into this for us?
Yes.
You seem to have an angle on this.
Everyone takes him so seriously.
Everyone takes him so seriously.
And in Deep Red, the same thing. The protagonist there. And I would argue, at least in this movie, he's a writer. And we don't... I think he's a fiction writer, but I'm not sure.
Sure.
Maybe he's not. Maybe he does nonfiction and investigative stuff and research and all of this, and it makes sense that he's so dogged about these things. And maybe he's great at finding facts. Who knows?
Right.
It's not really explained. So at least in this, there's some nominal reason why they might let him get involved. But all of the male protagonists, it's just like, you seem like a capable man.
And it's so fascinating to me too, because just narratively, the way that stories tend to work, you would think that would be the cops being like, don't get involved in this, we'll handle this, and then the guy being like, they're not looking in the right place.
Right.
This one, the cops are literally bringing him in and showing him evidence and being like, what do you make of this?
It's really interesting because I feel like in so many of these movies, the cop plot is introduced as a way to create more conflict.
Right.
In most of these movies.
Exactly. Yes.
And in this one, the cop plot is there to spoon feed the protagonist more information.
Yes.
And give him more clues and more data to kind of keep him going, to fuel him up and set him loose.
Yeah, it's pretty explicitly an exposition machine.
Yeah, which I don't know how I feel, because on the one hand, it does feel a little weird that the cops are so just like, hey, buddy, you know what? We'll let you handle this one. Yeah. Random American who is trying to leave this country. But on the other hand, it's kind of nice. It's kind of refreshing to have it not be yet another Stephen King movie where the cops are like, we think you did it. There's all this evidence that it couldn't possibly be you, but we still think you did it. So it's kind of nice that it's not that, at least. They suspect him very briefly, and then they're pretty much like, no, it's not him.
Which is really funny because it's essentially the equivalent of getting pulled over for a speeding ticket, and then they're like, I'm sorry, we pulled over the wrong car. Since you're here, do you think you could help us find the car that was actually speeding? And you're like, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, of course.
I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, and it's the main protagonist, I feel like, is never really in danger. At least in Deep Red, the main guy has a couple close run-ins. Yeah. This one, he's pretty clean, aside from when his girlfriend gets attacked.
Well, no, I mean, he is attacked a couple times.
That's true. There's the one scene in the alleyway where they swing the thing at him, and then the assassins. Where do the assassins come from?
I have no idea. Maybe the husband hiring them to try and scare him off or something. But I think part of the problem in this one is that Sam, the protagonist, is just so calm.
I guess that's what it is.
He's so unfazed by all of it. He just none of it really phases him. He doesn't seem... The worst he seems at any point is tired.
Yeah.
He comes home one day and he's tired, and Julia's like, well, you don't seem very enthusiastic. And he's like, I'm tired. Yeah. And that's the worst we see him. Even when he's really frantic, or quote unquote frantic, he seems pretty mellow, pretty middle of the road, even when he's running down the road for somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why my memory was that he wasn't in much trouble, is because you never get the feeling that he's in trouble. Yeah. It's just a scene happens and he's like, that's crazy. Someone tried to cut my head off. Anyway.
Yeah, when the person tries to meat cleaver him in the foggy alleyway, and the little old lady is like, watch out.
Yeah. Yes.
She's the person swings, they hit a pipe, they run away. And the little old lady goes, oh, are you okay? And he goes, oh yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, fine.
And he just keeps walking.
Yeah.
And then he leaves a little old lady out there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some meat cleaver toting psychopath.
Yeah, well, everybody's got to go sometime, I guess.
Yeah, he's this man is extremely zen, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and am I wrong in saying that there is no way to actually solve this mystery? Because the other thing about this that was driving me kind of nuts is he ends up going down all of these threads, like chasing down these threads that ultimately really don't seem to add up to anything. And when you finally do find out what adds up, there is no possible way you could have figured this out unless you yourself have also been raped and driven insane by a painting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one thing that I like less about this one versus Deep Red again.
Yeah.
Because if you go back, because the whole thing with Deep Red is that when the main character sees the murder and he rushes into the apartment, afterwards he thinks a painting has been stolen or moved.
Right. Yep.
In that scene in the very beginning when he runs in, you can see the killer.
Yes.
And then the killer leaves. Like that moment is shown to you, but your own eye just kind of glosses over it. It's kind of like an optical illusion.
Right, yeah.
I rewatched this movie and you
you did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And you do not see, like, in the beginning struggle between the black-clad figure and Monica, who's the woman in white, you do not see how that struggle starts.
Right.
You just see her getting stabbed and then the person in black jumping down the stairs and running away.
Yeah. And
you would have to have seen, even kind of like distortedly or like through a mirror reflection, or you would have had to have seen her start with the knife,
right,
in order to even have the possibility of figuring out that it was her.
Because the twist and the reveal ends up being that the woman that he sees
Monica
stabbed at the beginning is actually the killer, and she was struggling with her husband.
Yes, who's been trying to stop her.
Right, even though he was wearing the exact same thing that she wears when she kills people.
Unless she wears his clothes when she kills people.
Well, either way, he was dressed.
Yes,
he was dressed like the killer from I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah. Black hat, black trench coat, black pants.
Yeah,
and a knife.
And so the turn is that he actually is stabbing her in self-defense, whereas she was actually trying to kill him. And it's like, I don't know. I didn't find it fully satisfying, mainly because, like you're saying, I think it plays dirty pool a little bit.
Yeah.
And also, this movie, again, cares so little about the plot that the way that they give you all of this stuff is, first they make you believe that the husband did it.
Yes.
And his confession is literally him falling out a window, and then seconds before he dies, he goes, "It was me. I was the killer. I killed everyone because I didn't want my wife to hurt anymore. So that I did it. It was me." And then he
into
dies.
the tiniest microphone you've ever seen in your life.
Which they were ready with the microphone, which was they're on it there. And of course that's a smoke screen for a final scene that I still, again, he has to put the pieces together in his head. Yeah. That the painting is this woman is a illustration of this woman being sexually assaulted, which has then driven her insane to kill people.
And it's interesting because the movie does try to give you some of those pieces.
Yeah.
So, he witnesses Monica get stabbed and she survives, and this is how he gets embroiled in this whole investigation, and he starts helping the cops try to figure out what the hell's going on, and it leads him to, because there's 3 women who've already been killed. And despite the fact that the cops keep saying they have nothing in common, there's nothing in common in these 3 murders, but we know the same guy all did it, so it's a serial killer. And it's like, that's interesting. That's interesting logic.
That's like dorm room logic, where you're like, listen, I know that 3 different kinds of food have been stolen from my fridge, and I know that the same person did it. And you're like, dude, you've been eating your own food. It's just gone. Right. Plus, people come and go out of this room. Who knows who used to? No, it's a serial killer.
Yeah, exactly. So they sort of in tracking these women who've been murdered first. One of them worked at an art gallery. No. At like an antique shop.
Yes.
And that's where this painting was sold from.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how the painting gets introduced, and she's the first one killed. So the implication is that at some point Monica came in because she's wealthy, married to this wealthy art dealer guy. She comes into the antique shop and buys this painting of her own attack, and seeing it drives her crazy.
Right.
And so she kills the girl who sells it to her. And then later, Sam tracks down the artist who we should talk about.
We should.
And the artist says, oh, that painting is a true story. I knew the girl it happened to.
Mm-hmm.
Like a madman got a hold of her and he attacked her, and it was horrible. That thread is the only way. Like they would have had to add like 3 more steps down that thread.
Right.
Like, what was the name of the girl? Oh, well, you know, I think she changed her name, but back then she was known as whatever. And then he would have had to keep following that for it to eventually lead him to Monica.
Right.
Which would have then been like at least some evidence that it was her. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like they just kind of drop it.
Well, because there
which
was
is fine, but
there were other women who were murdered that I
Yes.
don't think.
no, they don't look into at all.
Like the woman.
Oh wait, well the prostitute, because that's how they get to so long.
Right, but what? So she's not connected in any way, though, right? Or
No, she was just a lady of the night.
yeah, and the nighty lady with the cigarette, she wasn't connected to
Nope.
anything, right?
Nope.
And
Lady in the stairwell.
well, yeah, lady in the stairwell, and also the way that that woman with the cigarette is killed
Yeah.
is very rapey
Yes.
in a way that, I mean, I guess you could rationalize as well. I mean, the rape is the thing that's triggering her, so I don't know, but it's just
Well, and if she's identifying with her own attacker, that's what he did to her. So maybe she's repeating out her own attack over and over again on these other women.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I guess that's how you could look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, there's the whole like mind hunter thing of like stabbing is a stand-in for the sexual act.
Right. Yeah. It's a tough. Like, I don't know if it ultimately really matters because the style of the movie is the thing.
But it's just so interesting that that's why I can tell this is kind of an earlier Argento movie, because the style of the movie is the thing and should be the thing and like kind of should be more of the focus. And I feel like this one is still kind of trying to prop itself up with plot
Yeah.
a little bit, because it's
Yeah.
maybe a little tentative about just leaning really hard into like the weirdness and
Yeah.
just the visuals of everything.
And that's not to say that he doesn't, because when he does, I think it's when the movie's at its best.
Absolutely.
Like, I think the first sequence where he stumbles upon the woman getting stabbed is awesome.
Yep.
And the chase with the guy with Kurt Barlow in the yellow
Yes.
jacket is really great.
Yep.
The woman in the stairwell.
I love
kill
that
is
scene.
Really, really good.
I think that's maybe my favorite scene in the movie.
Yeah, when he leans into his what become more of his kind of trademark, the movie really starts to kind of hum.
Yeah.
But it does feel like it is the plot is just bare bones propping up,
Yeah.
scaffolding for the rest of this stuff.
Yes.
Which I don't know. How did you feel? I guess we should. How did you feel about this movie? Did you like it?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough when you've seen two movies that are so similar by the same director and you like one more.
Yeah.
It's a little tough to like not compare the two. So it's hard for me to look at this one separate from Deep Red.
Mm-hmm.
But I did like it. I found the characters weirdly likable most of the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, everyone's just either so bizarre or conversely, like, so normal. Like, Julia strikes me as, like, deeply normal.
Yeah.
Which is kind of
Yeah.
nice. Do you know what I mean? That she's, like, the straight person in, like, entire movie full of weirdos and characters.
Yep.
And despite Sam's sometimes flat affect, I think he's a good main character for this movie, because he is kind of like a sponge. He is just sort of soaking in everything around him and like letting himself go deeper and deeper into it.
Yeah, and I think one of the more interesting aspects of this that they don't really get into that much is how Sam's story is that he's a writer who is currently struggling from writer's block.
Yeah.
And once he starts investigating this murder, his writer's block goes away.
Yeah.
And he starts writing again. And it kind of, that kind of stuff is what makes the kind of thematic stuff and the subtextual stuff about this a lot more interesting than the plot.
Yes.
Because, again, it is very much about like voyeurism and watching and violence and the effect of violence on people, and like, for better or worse, depending on how you prefer to digest this stuff, Argento's blending of sex and murder is very purposeful.
Yeah.
You know, like he's really kind of being this is something that he perfects later on in something like Suspiria, where he kills people in these really gruesome ways, but he does it to the extent that it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's it's beautiful to watch, but it's also deeply disturbing.
Yeah.
Like there's a bit in Suspiria that I still think about where I'm like, man, he just really was swinging for the fence to try and do some weird shit where I think it's the first girl who gets killed in Suspiria, the one who falls through the glass.
Oh, yes.
As she's getting stabbed, there is a close-up of, you can see her exposed beating heart in her chest that you just see him stab directly into. And it's like, man, you know, it seems like overkill, but it's like purposefully he's overkilling and doing it in such a disturbing way to kind of make you feel two ways about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's tough because you know, I think he's probably better at that than a lot of people that came after him, because I think a lot of movies that came after him kind of do the thing that always happens when there's a very popular kind of like genre changing thing, which is they kind of take the wrong message out of it.
Yeah.
Or the wrong theme out of it.
Yeah, they take the surface level, like.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you end up getting a lot of these Italian movies, specifically Italian Giallo movies specifically, that are very violent and very kind of like sexually exploitative.
Right. You want to see it's sort of like, oh, people loved Bird with the Crystal Plumage. They must want to see more large-breasted women in sheer nighties get stabbed.
Right, and not just get stabbed.
Yes.
It's like
get
during
bloody murdered. Yeah.
During the act of being murdered, their clothes come off. And,
right.
You know, it's not just stab, stab, stab. It's like, we're going to cut off her panties, and then we're going to slowly cut her shirt off, and then we're going to slowly stab her right into her boobs.
It's the opening of what is the joke, the opening of Scary Movie. Do you remember that, when it's like the Drew Barrymore stand-in and she's running through the like yard and like her sweater gets pulled off and then her pants get pulled off and she just ends up running in her underwear through the yard.
And then she gets stabbed in the implant and the implant deflates.
Yep.
I tried to watch that movie recently. That's a rough one to watch.
I have not watched that in probably like, when did it come out?
Oh, geez.
If it's 20 years, I probably haven't watched it in 20 years.
Probably over.
Yeah.
What year is 20? Yeah, I think that was probably late 90s, early 2000s. So at least 20 years, I would say.
Old. But yeah, I think it's interesting because, you know, when these women in this movie, when you see the women murdered, it's also a bit of a red herring because there is such a sexual overtone to it that you believe it is a man doing it kind of implicitly.
Sure.
Like, it doesn't, at least for me, it didn't initially occur to me that it might be a woman because it seemed so predatory in that way. And then, the connection between, like, these women are getting killed in this almost erotic way. And at the same time, throughout this whole movie, once, you know, we meet Sam and he sees these murders, he also, like, cannot keep his hands off of his girlfriend.
Right. Yeah.
So it's kind of like there's this thrill or charge that's going in both directions.
Right.
Where he all of a sudden becomes very virile, should we say, in both, like, his relationship with Julia, but also in his work. like all of a sudden he's able to produce. Like
Right.
he doesn't need the sex metronome anymore.
Or maybe that's like when it works the best.
Yeah,
is when
maybe.
he's like ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah, but all of these like the thematic stuff is really interesting to me. And I also appreciate how you're not beaten over the head with it. Like it's not sort of like art is death and art is murder. But you can also draw those things together as you like.
Yeah.
The fact that so much of this happens in an art gallery, the fact that so much of it has to do with a painting. Like it does kind of go into the what kind of effects can art have on people if you like separate yourself from it on a human level, or you're taking the wrong message from it.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
What if Monica had seen the painting of her own attack and instead of identifying with the killer, identified with the victim still?
Right.
You
She
know,
just like started a nonprofit or something.
Exactly. Or like maybe come to terms with her own trauma, or maybe have a different type of breakdown. I don't
Sure.
know. But it's sort of like she looked at a piece of art and she took the wrong lesson from it.
Well, you really kind of get two sides of the equation in this, because you've got Monica, who is driven to violence through art, but then you've got Sam, who's driven to art through violence.
Yeah.
And it is a really, I like that it does kind of push these buttons both ways, because it doesn't really give you, there's really not there's no message you should be drawing from this.
It's not saying art is bad.
Right.
And it's also not saying art is always good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's so much baked into this about the idea of consuming visual things and consuming art, and the relationship between violence and art and stuff like that. And it is a lot of it's a lot for a first movie, frankly.
Yeah.
And again, it is not explicitly on the surface, because
Right.
I think I find Argento movies to be difficult sometimes, because the murders can be so fetishistic
Yeah.
that it's like,
That's fair.
I don't know if I'm giving him too much credit for what he's doing, if he is doing this for all the reasons I said, or if he's doing it just because like he kind of gets off on it. Because
his response to that would probably be, why not both?
Probably, especially because I believe in all of his movies, the first person killer is him. Like he is the one acting as the killer in those scenes.
Interesting.
And also because I think he's kind of a weird guy.
You don't say.
Based on the number of times he's made his daughters get naked in his movies, I'm going to say he's kind of a weird guy.
I am shocked.
But you know, I think it can be difficult, and I think it's easy to write this stuff off because the surface level stuff is, this is just a very exploitative women murder movie where the male protagonist is completely unflappable and blah, 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 which all of that is true. It's like RoboCop, right? Stay with me.
That is not where I expected this sentence to go, but okay.
Stay with me. RoboCop, on its surface,
I want to watch Dario Argento's RoboCop.
I would fucking pay.
Oh my God.
I would pay to have that movie made. RoboCop, on its surface, is exactly what everybody who criticizes RoboCop says it is. But it is also in and of itself criticizing and satirizing all of that stuff that people are criticizing it for.
Yeah.
And so it gives you this extra layer of interpretation if you want it.
Right.
On the surface, RoboCop is a dumb science fiction movie, exploitation movie about a robot cop. But if you really want to get into it, it's a lot more than that.
Yeah. I mean, you could say it's similar to people who run around with the Punisher logo on their T-shirts and whatever and don't actually know anything about what the Punisher stands for a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So I do have an interesting, I mean, of the Giallo movies that I've watched, I do find that a lot of them post Argento do skew more like sexual and like the sex and violence.
Yeah.
They kind of, a lot of them unfortunately kind of turn into, here's a bunch of attractive big-breasted Italian women.
Yes.
Let's watch them get killed.
Yes.
man, I was watching one. So when I was doing Poser, we kind of based Poser quite a bit on, or like the look of it and stuff on these Giallo movies. And so I was watching a bunch of them on Shudder, and at the time Shudder had a whole Giallo section. They might, I don't know if they still have it. The movies might be scattered at this point.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I watched a decent number of them, and there are some that are just like unapologetically misogynistic movies.
Yeah.
And it's like to the point where it's like a lot of like slapping women around and stuff like that. And,
Yeah.
you know, dragging them into a room, having sex with them, and then like, you know, they get killed 5 seconds later.
Yeah.
And it's really, you know, they can be tough watches, and you get to a point where you're like, all right, I appreciate the genre, but like, what are we doing here?
Well, it's sort of like any other genre, like you were saying. If something hits a chord with the viewing public and
the
gets
fifth chord
and gets popular,
Sorry, that's another Giallo movie.
you know, it's they're taking the wrong lessons from the movies that come before.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like with slasher movies, like the further on down the line from sort of the originators of that genre, the more you end up with stuff that's just kind of like mindless and silly and violent.
Right.
Because it's really kind of just chasing that lowest common denominator to try and like make something cheap and make money off of it.
Yeah, and they do, I mean, I will say that they do tend to get pretty freaky. There's some that get like really freaky as far as, you know, motivations for the killings and like what's actually mean. There's one of them, the one that I came across that was probably one of the more intense ones, all said and done, was a movie called What Have You Done to Solange?
Oh.
Which is...
It's a great title.
These movies have the best fucking titles. Like Black Belly of the Tarantula, Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key.
Whoa.
The Red Queen Kills 7 Times.
Oh my God.
Amazing titles. What Have You Done to Solange is like a Giallo murder mystery that takes place at like a girls' boarding school.
Great.
And, you know, by the time you get to the end, you find out the sordid... sexually deviant reasons for everything happening, but that was one where I was like, woof. Like it was, I remember it not being so much titillating sexual, but by the end it was like disturbingly sexual, if that makes sense.
Yeah, where it's sort of like, you know, whoever's making this or the target audience for it is getting off on it more than they're thinking about it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's more just sort of that,
or they're just trying to disturb you, you know,
right?
Which again, I think it's up to you to decide how much of that stuff you're willing to watch or enjoy. Because you know, like a movie like this, I could see a movie like Bird with the Crystal Plumage. I could see a lot of people writing it off at the time.
Oh yeah,
but it's the kind of movie where I'm glad that it was made. Like I'm glad because I find this subject matter to be interesting, and you know, it does kind of make you go, you know, like there's, it's not easy in a lot of places,
right? Well, I mean,
which
like,
is, I think it's healthy, but
but I mean, similarly, like, you know, we recently did Martin, which is a really hard watch at points,
right?
You know, so it's but I think that movie and this one, the thing they have in common is. You can argue about how much the creators intended these themes or how much it was just like, is Dario Argento just a weirdo? But the fact that you can find these deeper themes in it to discuss, I think makes it worthwhile to kind of sit through the discomfort. Yeah. Whereas some of the lesser versions of these kinds of stories that don't have that sort of backbone holding them up, it's kind of just like, oh, okay, this just feels... like shock value and nothing else. Yeah.
You know, it's another thing that does make me think of Peeping Tom. Yeah. Because I feel like Peeping Tom is operating in the same kind of spheres as a movie. Like they're also very much about voyeurism. Also
many creeps with a camera and sharp objects.
Yep. And also very much has a undercurrent of sort of sexual dysfunction and trauma. Yep. That manifests itself in a destructive way. Yeah. What I'm saying is Peeping Tom needs more respect, but people need to see it. Peeping Tom plus, if you take Peeping Tom and you add Blood and Black Lace. You get Dario Argento. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's pretty good math.
I can't wait for you to watch Blood and Black Lace.
I'm very excited to.
It's like it's kind of like this, but it's closer to Suspiria than this.
Okay.
But it's
That's
like
good because I love Suspiria.
it's like if Suspiria was a lot more like swinging 60s.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's
All right. That's gonna be a fun one.
And also like again, I can see his influences in this. Like the killer is kind of essentially dressed like the killer from Blood and Black Lace, who is basically black trench coat, black hat.
Who's kind of dressed like the killer from Deep Red.
Right. Yeah. It becomes a trope in and of itself.
Yeah.
You know, he's synthesizing a lot of stuff here.
Yeah.
For the purpose of kind of deconstructing it at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit. I don't know how much credit to give him, frankly, because I think
that's what makes this movie so interesting is that you can argue it in both directions.
Yeah.
And it almost at this point doesn't matter how much he intended or not.
Yeah.
What matters is what the viewers can find in it.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
maybe he didn't intend, maybe we are giving him too much credit, but like you can still argue it. It's still a salient point.
Yes.
I also like how this movie deals with the concept of obsession.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where like Monica is so traumatized by her attack that she becomes fully defined by it and obsessed with it and has to keep reenacting it on others over and over and over again. Like she cannot stop. And then I think it's also interesting to watch Sam sort of let go of everything else in his life to descend into his obsession with this murderer.
Yeah.
And with what's happening. Like my biggest piece of evidence for that is how in the sort of climactic sequence towards the end where the husband has died and Julia and Monica and their friend have disappeared. And Sam tracks them down and he goes into this creepy apartment. It's pitch black. And he finds the painting.
Mm-hmm.
And he finds his friend who's been murdered. And then he confronts the murderer finally. And she reveals herself to be Monica. He had gone there originally looking for Julia. But the minute he realizes that he has the murderer in his sights, he completely forgets about her.
He does forget about her, yeah.
She's like whimpering on the floor, and I don't even know if he realizes she's there.
Yeah. Well, she's not going anywhere. She's fine.
But he doesn't see her.
Right, yeah.
Like, I don't know if he even knows she's there. He just completely forgets about her. And this is supposed to be the person he's in love with. And yet he just is just like, yeah, whatever. Maybe she's dead. Goodbye. I gotta chase this murderer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I was looking for in this movie, it's one of my favorite Argento trademarks, is the crossing of a threshold into a completely unexpected space.
Yep.
And my favorite example being in Inferno, when there's a girl in a basement of a house who drops a key into a puddle. And so she goes to reach into the puddle, and it turns out that the puddle is actually an entranceway into the second and third layer of the basement that are underwater.
Oh,
it's fucking great.
Wow.
And Suspiria obviously has the door behind the flowers and stuff. So I was wondering if that was something that was present as early as this movie. And it comes at the end when he sees the painting, he finds his dead friend, and then he opens the door and he's presented with the first room where he sees the girl get stabbed, Monica get stabbed. And I was like, oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh God, I had a thought and then it departed from me.
Well, here's a question for you.
Sure.
So Bird with the Crystal Plumage.
Yes.
I think is a great title. However, I don't think it's a great title for this movie, because I had seen the poster, or the cover for the most recent DVD, which depicts a bird that looks like it's made out of crystal.
Yes.
And so I thought there was some sort of crystal bird in this movie that at the center of this plot.
Yep.
When it turns out, just for half a second, there's a bird that happens to live underneath the window of Monica or whatever.
Yes.
Good title, bad title? Were you disappointed at the involvement of the bird? Like you hear the bird with the crystal plumage. I'm thinking, oh, Maltese falcon. There's going to be something that kind of thing.
You know, I think I agree with the point that it's not a good title for this movie, because I also feel like it does sort of give you more of like a Maltese falcon. Like this is going to be more of a classic detective noir, at least in my head. I don't know if it's purely just the Maltese falcon connection. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else you would call this movie though.
Yeah, I
Do
guess.
You know what I mean?
I guess what I would have preferred is keep the name, figure out a way to work the bird into the story thematically or something.
Every time she hears the bird call, she goes crazy.
No, just like, I don't know, something about the bird or something about the way the bird in captivity is somehow
Sure.
I don't know, thematically. Beauty in a cave, blah, I don't know, some bullshit.
Yeah.
Just a way to make it a little
art,
bit more
art, bullshit. Yeah.
Just a way to make it more resonant than just being like, oh, that clicking sound is that bird with the big tail feather, which is
that lives in the zoo.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
We do have to talk a little bit about Berto Consalvi.
Yes. Is that the painter?
Yes.
Yes. So I'm glad.
Clay, when are you going to enter your mystical period?
Everything I do is my mystical period. So I'm glad that you recapped what happened in that scene, because I must have missed where he says, oh, the painting is based on an actual thing. Yeah. Because as I was watching the movie, after that scene was over, I was like,
why did we go here?
He didn't learn a goddamn thing. Why did he go here? Like, other than to get him out of the house so his girlfriend could be attacked. Mm-hmm. Which, I might add, if you had to catch a plane in 8 hours and your husband said, I'm going to take a train an hour and a half out of the city, I'll be back in plenty of time.
Also, hey, baby, there's a murderer killing beautiful young women. You're a beautiful young woman. I'm going to leave you alone now. And the killer knows where you live.
Right. Yes.
Goodbye.
Yeah, especially after I feel like he's already had, the cops have been like, you have to watch out. He's probably looking for you now, even though I'm not really sure why.
The phone call was like, is the girl with you? She's so
right.
young and beautiful. How would you like it if she died? It's a pretty explicit threat.
It's like if there had been someone in the house with Drew Barrymore at the beginning of Scream. Yeah. He picked up the phone and then he was like, huh, that was weird. Yeah. Well, I'm going to go get a coffee. I'll be back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know why, but the thing that stood out to me was when he was like, when's the plane? In 8 hours? Okay, it's an hour and a half away. I can take the train out there and be back in plenty of time. And I was like, you are not going to make that.
No.
Like, if there's anything I can say that I know for sure, you are not getting on that plane.
Yeah, but I think that's, evidence that he didn't really want to.
That's true.
He didn't want to leave before the mystery was over. He tried to convince himself he was okay with it.
Plus, I don't know if he ever got his passport back from the cops.
I know. We see them take it very pointedly, and we never see them give it back. Yeah. So who knows?
But yeah, the what's his name?
Berto Consalvi.
Consalvi. Yeah. Very interesting scene. He's
dropped off in the middle of nowhere.
Yep. Also, he gets dropped off, and he says to the taxi driver, "Thanks so much for driving. That'd be a hell of a walk." And then the taxi guy leaves.
I don't think it's a taxi. I think it's just like a local who I think he just hitched a ride, right. And it's just some guy who's like, "All right, bye."
Especially if he's got to get back to catch a plane.
Yeah,
you pay that guy a couple extra lira to stick around.
Hey, will you sit here for 20 minutes while I deal with this crazy man who's boarded up and cemented all of the doors and windows in his house except for one?
So that building has all the doors and windows except for one boarded up.
Yep.
It's full of cats.
Yep. Including naughty Theodore.
Theodore. None of those cats are going outside.
No.
He's a painter. That means he's got tons of paint shit around.
Uh-huh.
He's cooking cat meat.
Yep.
He looks like Grizzly Adams.
Yes.
What I'm getting at is...
He has not bathed in many, many days.
That place must have stunk so bad.
Yes. But on the upside, he's eating cats.
That's true. I'm staying healthy.
It's such a weird... Like you were saying, there had to be at least one weirdo in this movie, and there's like 7.
Yes.
There's like when he sees Monica get stabbed at the very beginning, a man walks by outside and is very strange. Mm-hmm. He's just a weird dude. So he's a weirdo.
That guy calls the cops, though.
He does call the cops, but he's still a weirdo.
True.
The antiques shop owner is clearly supposed to be a weirdo. Consalvi's a weirdo. The pimp is a weirdo.
Yes.
There are so many weirdos in this
It's,
movie.
you know, this movie kind of... I feel like the weirdness of the characters almost takes the place of any well-constructed red herring, because all of the characters are so weird, you can't help but think, oh, this guy's going to be important, but he's not.
Yeah.
He's just a weirdo.
This guy could have murdered 4 women.
Yeah, it's just like, we need to have a scene where exposition is given.
Mm-hmm.
How do we make that interesting?
Make everybody a weirdo.
Yeah, let's make him a pimp and have him have to have a speech impediment that requires him to say so long at the end of every sentence. So
bring in the perverts, Clay.
Bring in the perverts. Nobody asked Ursula Andress, the transvestite, whether or not she knew who the killer was.
What if she did?
That's what I'm saying. They should have asked her.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I don't know. I just had to bring up Berto Consalvi and his weird ass house.
Honestly,
his disgusting dinner.
The thing that stood out to me about that stuff is, and I know this is unfair because movies have to be made on a budget, but when you have a character in your movie, and especially a plot that centers on a painting, just hire someone who can paint, please. Those paintings were terrible. They were terrible.
I like at one point he gets up from the table and he just like fills in half a circle and he goes, genius.
Yeah, he's like, it's like his paintings are like let's go to a paint night paintings. And and people are acting as though he's like, Picasso or something, or like the next big thing. His paintings were terrible.
Which I think he knows.
I hope so. I hope that's the point, is that he's gone completely insane.
I think that is part of the point. I mean, he's like obviously very poor if he's eating cats. I don't think that's like a preferred diet.
Yeah.
And then he tries so hard to sell the main character a painting, and the main character is like trying to hustle his ass out that window and down that rickety ladder because he realized he just ate a cat.
Yes.
And he keeps lowering the price of his painting by 50,000 lira at every turn.
Yes. You know, the eating of the cat thing was strange too, because Sam starts that scene where they're eating.
Yes.
By faking eating.
Yes.
But then as they're cleaning up, he pops like 2 chunks of cat into his mouth. So why even bother faking it if you're going to eat it anyway?
I don't think I don't know. I don't know for sure. I think I made sense of it in my head as in like, this guy doesn't pay attention to what he does with his hands. Everybody's been yelling at him all movie not to touch things and get his fingerprints on them.
Yeah.
So he's just like, yeah, okay, I'll just eat this, whatever. Whoops. Didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
I think he also thinks the silverware is dirty.
That's possible too.
But I don't know.
So yeah, what are your final? I would say the last thing to mention is Ennio Morricone, the great Ennio Morricone does the music for this.
It's so insane.
It is. I feel
I
like
love
it's it feels very a little bit of Hangover from Rosemary's Baby, because it's got the same kind of like la 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 la.
Yeah, like childlike.
Yeah,
kind
a lot of that in there.
Yeah, but there are these moments where the soundtrack gets kind of like breathy, like a woman breathing, and I always think that's really interesting.
There's also like crazy jazz in there too.
Yes. Yeah, there's definitely a whole sequence that feels like a scene from the anime Cowboy Bebop.
Yes. You know, another movie I would actually credit as probably an influence on this is, have you ever seen Blow Up?
No, but I know of it.
It actually stars David Niven, who is the guy from Deep Red, and is about a photographer who takes a photograph, and when he develops the photograph, he notices there is a dead body in the photograph. And then so he starts going down the path of trying to figure out who, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And gets very weird and surreal. It actually features the band The Yardbirds.
Oh.
Featuring Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page.
Wow.
In, pre-Led Zeppelin Jimmy Page. In a really weird scene where he's like, the guy's like wandering through the streets of London and then happens upon this performance of the Yardbirds, where the Yardbirds are playing on stage and the whole crowd is just standing there silently watching them. And then the amplifiers start fritzing out, so Jeff Beck smashes his guitar then throws his guitar into the audience, and the whole audience erupts and goes nuts. And it's really strange, but it's a great movie. It also was sort of like spiritually remade by Brian De Palma as Blowout, which hopefully we'll get to watch at some point.
Cool.
But yeah, what are your final thoughts on The Bird with the Crystal Plumage?
You know, I really liked it. I'm really glad we watched it. I think it's a really interesting, if you like Argento at all, if you've seen any of his other movies, to kind of go back to this one and kind of see where it all began and how, like you were saying, how quickly he kind of hit the ground running with his thing. I did want to bring up, and because Greg asked me this question, where he was like, what makes this a horror movie? Why isn't this just like considered a thriller?
I think it probably is.
Yeah.
I just think that Argento ends up, all of his stuff gets lumped in. It's like John Carpenter. John Carpenter didn't really make that many horror movies.
Yeah.
Well, I guess he kind of did, but he made other stuff as well. But
Sure.
he's known as like a horror director. And
it's
while I wouldn't call like Escape from New York a horror movie, I feel like people kind of lump all of his things together.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, and I think a lot of things with serial killers tend to get pegged as horror rather than a thriller.
Yeah, I mean, this is as much of a horror movie as Scream,
as Peeping Tom
or Peeping Tom.
Yeah.
I one of the things that I found funny about this is how stylistically it almost seems restrained for him.
Yeah, it does in a lot of ways.
Especially knowing where he goes after. The murders in this are almost tasteful. aside from the slicing off of undergarments and whatnot.
Right. And there's some great set pieces in this movie, but they're not nearly as wild as some of the later ones.
Right. Like, you know, as we'll see when we get there, he goes from off-camera spurts of blood on the floor in this movie to Tenebrae, where someone gets their hand cut off and just like a geyser of blood makes this fan of red against the white wall.
Oh, my God.
Wild. Anyway, we'll get there. Yeah, I like this. I liked it a lot more as I was thinking about it afterwards. And it's a movie that I would like to revisit and kind of see what other kind of like contemporary readings of it are and stuff, because I do think it is a really interesting first step for him and for the genre.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, again, these things, it's really interesting tracking. That's why I love tracking back on these movies, because you can see where it's like, oh, Mario Bava was doing this, and then Dario Argento took that and started doing this, and then, oh, Bob Clark took this and did this in Black Christmas.
Yeah.
And then, oh, John Carpenter took this and did this in...
Yeah, there's like a lineage you can kind of trace things back through.
And then, Sean Cunningham took Halloween and took a little bit of Carrie and started... it's really it's really fun to see how these things kind of like the family tree of all this stuff. But anyway, I think that's going to do it for The Bird with the Crystal Plumage.
We did it.
I hit the randomizer button. Beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop. And next time, I'm very excited about this.
Oh.
We are going to be doing number 105, 1958's The Horror of Dracula, starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee.
Nice.
As Van Helsing and Dracula, respectively.
Oh, I'm excited about this one, too.
Yeah, especially since we botched it so bad on the first Dracula movie we did.
Aww.
I'm looking forward to doing this. I was very upset.
Yes.
Because I saw on Twitter someone had, I think like Bloody Disgusting or whoever, one of these websites, had put up a thing saying that the 4K version of Bram Stoker's Dracula was coming back to theaters. And I was like, perfect excuse. Go see that.
Yeah.
We'll do the show.
Yeah.
Apparently it's only in the UK.
Oh, boo.
So hopefully maybe it will come over here.
Oh, I hope so.
Because they did the same thing with Apocalypse Now, and that came over here eventually. So these things tend to... I would be shocked if it didn't get over here eventually.
Yeah. Good inspiration to take another crack at it.
Yeah. But until then, I guess we'll just have to settle for Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. So Thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Clay.
If you'd like to help support us, head over to patreon.com/thepensky-file. Sign up for our Patreon where you can follow Amanda and I as we're working our way through the second string of Stephen King. This month, October, we're doing Children of the Corn,
Yes.
I think.
Yes, I think
And
so.
then November will be Pet Sematary, and December will be 1990s adaptation of Stephen King's It,
Yes.
which I'm excited about. Also, we're getting very close to figuring out what we're going to do next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the front runners right now, we're probably going to put it up to a patron vote towards the end of the year, but I think the front runners are remakes and reboots, holiday films, so your New Year's Evils and your Leprechauns and your April Fool's Days. And also video nasties, a curated selection of video nasties.
A carefully vetted selection of
Yes.
video nasties.
Yes. So if you would like to vote on that when the voting happens, you're going to have to sign up for Patreon. So, catch 22. I don't think I used that correctly.
I believe we just call that incentive.
Yes. Extortion is what we call it.
Extortion.
But thank you guys for listening. Thank you for the support. And we will see you next time. Or I should say, so long.
I was going to do that. Damn it, Clay.
Okay. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for the support. And we will see you next time.
So long.
There we go.